Hi, everybody. Welcome. I've been telling you all that this is a moment for us to be together in community and to find our brilliant sisters, people that we can count on, people that we go to when we have problems. And I'm just blessed to bring you someone that I so admire and love. And we've had such great, deep conversations, right, Carla?
Absolutely.
That I just feel so comfortable with her. And I'm just so proud of her because she continues to inspire me and she will inspire all of you. Let me tell you a little bit about Carla. Carla Harris is the author of Expect to Win and Strategize to Win, and now Lead to Win. Incredible book that we're going to unpack because in this moment, hard times for so many of us, she's really encouraging us. This is an incredible moment to lead in order to win. She's a superstar, and in the Latino world we say you're a chingona. You kick butt, and you are the former vice chairman and managing director of Morgan Stanley. I mean, how many women get to that place? You currently serve as a senior advisor to the firm. You have degrees from Harvard, numerous honorary doctorates, and in 2013 you were appointed by President Barack Obama to chair the National Women's Business Council. You have many, many other incredible gifts. You're just a superstar.
Well, thank you.
I love you because you and I have always had very honest and real conversations. And I'm always looking forward to reading your content because when I'm feeling blah and down, you kind of lift me up. As you and I've said, you're a cup half full person. And I try to be a cup half full person, but it's been a rough couple of years. Those of you women that follow me know that I'm in Miami dealing with aging parents. It's very difficult. It's very painful, especially for us immigrants that we've practically raised our parents. And so, Carla, I want to start, as we always do, with a real question before we really get into leadership, because I have so many questions about leadership before we talk about, how to handle it. Right now, at least I'm going to start with myself. I've been feeling like, I've been a leader my whole life. I've had to be a leader as an immigrant. And yet now I'm almost feeling like, really? Is there another thing I have to do? Do I still have to do that sometimes? I just feel lately like I want to put the oxygen mask on myself. Why do we always have to lead women and then women of color? It's like, why now? And why can't we just take a break?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for the compliment on being a superstar, but honey, it does take one to know one. So you're wearing that superstar label yourself. And second of all, thanks for having me on your show on this podcast today. And third of all, let me say this: when you have the goods, when you're able to lead, then you're going to naturally take up the mantle, in fact, to do that. However, you need to understand that even as you lead, and even when you're always delivering excellence, at sometimes you're going to need a break. You're going to need to reflect, restore, refill. And it sounds like you're in one of those periods now. And frankly, Nely, no shame in that game. As I was saying to you before, there is no car that operates on full, no matter how, great the performance of that car is. At some point, it runs out of gas, right? And so the key is to make sure, at least for me, I don't like my car to get low. Right. So I fill the car back up before I'm actually seeing that little light comes on saying, you need gas, you need gas. And you need to know yourself well enough to know when you need to do that. And again, no shame in that game because you're always delivering excellence. You are a leader. But in order to do that at the level at which you play, you need to make sure that you're filling your tank, and in whatever way that means. Now, part of the issue is a lot of times as women, we don't know what that looks like. We don't know if that means I need to take 4 days and go sit on the beach somewhere, or if I need to go skiing, or if I need to just shut off all kinds of devices and sit in my house for 2 days. So it means you should invest a little bit and figure out what might filling up look like for me, and understand that the world's not going to come to an end if you unplug for 2 days or 4 days in order to refill.
Well, I have to say, I'm one of those people because, again, so many of us have not had a linear path, and when, all of us that are immigrants, many of us started working when we were 13, 14. I sold Avon when I was 12 years old. So at times I've taken entire years, or, I went, at 45, I went back to school for 4 years because I felt like I was like burnt out.
Mhm.
and I had nothing more to give. So in order to feel like I had something to give, I had to give to myself first.
Yes.
And that's how I'm kind of feeling right now. Like I'm at one of those periods. So I loved reading in your book when you said, when you go from being a contributor, a single contributor in the world, to having an aha that you're ready to lead. And sometimes leadership comes by accident. Like you don't even think you want to lead. Circumstance, life put you at the crossroads of having to choose to be a leader, and you don't even want it. You're like, no, no, dear God, no. And then it just, you have to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Can you
Yep.
talk
Your
about that?
destiny shows up and knocks on your door. That's absolutely right. And that's why I wrote about that, because I have a thesis, and you and I have talked about that women and people of color get their shot, especially in chaotic times, right? And as I looked around and I saw people like Mary Barra, or Carla Fiorini, or Meg Whitman, or Barack Obama, or Stan O'Neill, or Ken Frazier, or Ken Chenault. When I think about when they ascended to positions of leadership, there was always something going on in those organizations. So a lot of times, if you happen to be a woman or a person of color and you get that tap on the shoulder, it's going to be when there's a tough time. So you need to shift your thinking from just executing to thinking about who are your stakeholders now. And when you're an individual contributor, your primary stakeholder is your boss, the person that is evaluating your deliverable. But now when you become a leader, especially if you're leading a public company, now it's the board, now it's the shareholders, now it's the people who are on your executive leadership team, now the people within the organization. All these people are consuming you and have expectations. And again, you need to take the pause and think about what would each of them think success looks like from the seat that they're sitting in. Therefore, what would they expect of me, to understand what it is you need to do and how you need to inform your own plan of execution.
But in reading your book, I also realized, it's that sometimes your relationship with leadership as a person of color is a little bit twisted, because I was thinking about it and I'm like, sometimes you mention in the book that no one really teaches us how to be a leader. And sometimes the leaders we've seen when we've worked, I mean, I've worked in corporate America, and sometimes the leaders you see are like, it's my way or the highway. It's fear-based. If you don't like this job, there's many people that can have this. And it always feels like we don't belong, or it feels like there's a bad connotation almost to leadership,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's internal, that I have to lead. Oh my God, I'm always the one that has to be in charge. Why do I have to save everybody in my community and in my family? Or whether it's leaders that we've worked for that don't feel like us, don't look like us. Don't, I think a lot about myself in corporate America, and thinking, I couldn't even put words to it, and thinking these people are very, they're not relational. They're transactional. And that was really shocking to me, because coming from a Latino culture where you get to know people and they're your friends for life. And in corporate America, it's very transactional. What are you doing for me? If you're not working for me, if you're not making me money, I don't need you. So the relationship we as women or women of color have with the word leadership. Can
Mm-hmm.
you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the good news is, Nely, we are now in a different time. And one of the things I talk about in the book is that most people lead the way they were led, which is one of the reasons I wrote the book, because now we are in an environment where millennials and Zers are expecting something different from those leaders. And the people who are sitting in the leadership seats are primarily boomers and older Xers who grew up in that my way or the highway type leadership context. So now you have a complete mismatch. So these leaders need to behave differently in order to serve this new constituency. And you're absolutely right. If you were building your career in the late 80s, early 90s, and early 2000s, certainly as a woman, you saw many, many demonstrations of leadership that might not fit who you are, from as a woman, as a person of color, as a woman of color. But I would argue this, and this is the posture that I adopted, Nely, is that you can learn something from everybody. Right. So even though there might have been somebody that I absolutely did not like working for, who I absolutely did not think was leading very well, I took notes to make sure that I wouldn't adopt that behavior, to figure out what was it about what they were doing that did not motivate me, or that, actually made me feel some kind of way. Let me unpack what that was to make sure that I don't do that. Because again, most people lead the way they were led. And I never bought into the fact that that poor demonstration of leadership was the way you had to be in order to be successful. I just would not adopt that, and said, I'm going to do what I think is the right thing to do. And I'm going to treat people the way I would prefer to be treated. And let's see what happens. And that worked out okay. Now, it might have taken me a little bit longer, might have cost me some money along the way, but I could look at myself in the mirror when it was all said and done and said, I like her, right? And not feel like you had done something, wrong to somebody else in order to get where you were. So I do believe that looking at even what you would consider not to be a good example of leadership can be instructive. And so that's a productive way to look at that. But you're right, it makes for a strange relationship while you're going through it.
Well, the other thing that I realized reading your book is that when you lead in a time of crisis, and I think that women should also hear it, leading is also in your household, in your family.
Absolutely.
And when you're leading in a time of crisis, or where there's a force majeure problem like COVID, something that's greater than yourself that you had nothing to do with, let's talk about this thing where you feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And you talk in the book about how a leader should be, I'll let you say it, but authentic and just honest and sort of, instead of pretending they know, it's okay to say, I don't know.
Yes.
I'm doing the best I can right now.
And especially in this environment, people will respect you more for it, because millennials are looking at you closely and Zers are looking at you closely as their model. And if they don't see that measure of authenticity, that in itself becomes a reason not to follow you. That in itself becomes a reason not to trust you. And you need your people to trust you, because you are leading people into unknown territories. Why? By definition, we're all going into unknown territories, because none of us have ever lived on the other side of a global pandemic. None of us have ever seen the level of social unrest that we've seen, not in 60 years. So, most of us were toddlers, if we were even born at that time. So in order to get people to trust you going into unknown spaces, they need to see that measure of authenticity, and they need to see that transparency, because transparency is a critical ingredient to trust. And let me say this, Nely, it used to be the case in the 80s and 90s for sure. The way that you got to the leadership seat is that you were the undeniable expert. You had all the answers. You knew more than anybody else knew. That's kind of how you got there, and people revered you for that. But here's the deal. The rate of innovation now is 12 months at best. I'm about to argue that it might be 10 months, 9 months, but it's 12 months at best. So there's no way that you can be the undeniable expert on a thing, because it's changing so fast. So people aren't necessarily expecting you to be the expert, but they are now expecting you to be decisive. They're expecting you to be the one that can corral the information, that can keep the pathways to information open, that can gather all that information, synthesize it, and be decisive about which direction you need to go into. That's the profile of the person that people want to follow in today's environment.
That's amazing. And you also talk a lot about, admitting the things that you're feeling vulnerable about.
Absolutely.
And that's not a negative thing.
Yes, not at all. And in fact, millennials and Zers, I think, have an outsized appetite to not only collaborate, but to contribute. They really want to know that whatever they are doing is making an impact on the whole. And so to invite them into the solution-making process, to invite them into the results-making process is going to be something that is highly revered by them. So as the leader, starting off the conversation saying, hey, here's what we're trying to solve today. I'm not quite sure how we get there, or I don't even have a clue. Now, my thought is that this might be the path, but I'm not sure. So I'd love to hear how you guys are thinking about that. How would you approach that? And then to encourage an environment where everybody is contributing and pressure testing each other's ideas and each other's comments, not because they're trying to make somebody look bad, because they want to get to the best solution. Everybody wants to get to the best solution. You want to create an environment as a leader where everybody's fingerprints are on the blueprint. It doesn't get any better than that, because then everybody is invested in the success or failure of that endeavor, including you. And that's a very different thing than in the 80s and 90s, where I would consistently see leaders do this. If something didn't go well, it had to be somebody's fault. It was never our fault. And I think you have a better shot of retaining your people and inspiring your people if you own it as well. We're all in this together. It is our fault. It is our mistake. So let us fix it.
Sounds a lot like parenting, right? We have to all,
That's a fair
I
point.
tell my son that all the time. I go, don't try to give me an excuse. Just say, I'm sorry, I screwed up. It's okay. What is somebody going to do? Kill you?
Yep.
I want everybody listening to know that, we're talking about all this, but the book is really like a master class on how to be a leader. I want you to know that you really get incredible 10 pearls that are really just, you go deeply into how to be this incredible leader. So we don't have time today to talk about all of it, but one of the things you talk about is being an intentional leader.
Yes.
Can you speak about what that means?
Yes.
And you also say in the book, which we won't get into now, but there's a transformative leader and there's an intentional leader. I really resonated with the intentional leader.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that, because that's at the heart of the book. It's chapter 6. And the thesis is leadership does not just happen. It doesn't happen because you've been at a place for a long time. It doesn't happen because you are the most senior person in that organization. And it doesn't even happen because somebody gives you a title of authority or leadership. Leadership is intentional. You have to show up intentional every day with these 8 pearls: authenticity, building trust, creating clarity, creating other leaders intentionally, diversity, innovation, inclusivity, and voice. You must be willing to call a thing, no matter how bad the thing might be. And being mindful of those things every day that you choose to show up and wear that leadership jersey is the way to be a powerful, impactful, influential leader in today's context.
Wow, that is just so deep, because hard to do. And let's talk about that, because it sounds great, but I just put myself in the boat of being in a corporation as a woman, and in my case, a woman of color, and maybe not feeling so clear about my voice. A lot of this stuff has to be cultivated. And even when we sometimes get into those, I always tell women, Carla, and this, I always say, to be chosen, you have to choose yourself, right? Because women tend to not say, oh, I can do that. Right. So we want to wait till we've perfected it. And in fact, sometimes you just have to just jump in, but then you feel like, oh my God, I'm a fraud. I don't really know how to speak up. You still feel like you're in process with all of those things you just said. Mm-hmm. So where, I remember reading Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, and she's like, just lean in and stand up in the room. And I'm like, but girl, we're not even invited to the table. Sometimes you have to jump into the table, and then you jump in, and then you go, I don't know if I have any other juice left. Yeah. So let's talk about that, because yes, you're saying you have to decide, you have to have an intention to be a leader. But even within that, let's go over some of those. I know for my Latinas, and you and I've had this conversation, because we don't have a conversation between Black and brown women about why are Latinas sometimes so quiet when we seem to be, we're the minority in the room, another minority in the room, and we're like, why don't you speak up, girl? And we don't know in this country that maybe some of us come from, communist regimes or dictatorships. Like right now, it just happened in Cuba, that all these Cuban young rappers and everything spoke up. They're all in jail now for 35 years. Mm-hmm. So they shut down the rest of the country to not speak up. So these immigrants come here and they will not say a word. Yeah. So how do we deal with this? You get the guts to be intentional about getting the role, and then inside you're like, I can't really do this. How do you cultivate that?
Well, you're talking about the imposter syndrome. And I have to tell you, Nely, I cannot believe how much this question about the imposter syndrome has come up in the last couple of years. I have been scratching my head because the imposter syndrome was alive and well and kicking back in 1987 when I walked out of Harvard Business School. It was the big thing that everybody was talking about. So I am now questioning, how is it that it's 35 years later and we're still talking about the imposter syndrome? My conclusion is that our generation has not sent the message back down for those following behind us that there's never a reason for you to have the imposter syndrome. If you've gotten to the point where you have been invited into the room, you have to accept the fact that you belong in the room. Nobody gives you anything. No woman, no person of color. If you've gotten to that room, it's because you earned the right to be in that room. So take that as fact. Just like you take the sun coming out or the rain coming that day, if you see it, it's a fact. So you've gotten in there because you belong in there. People aren't making mistakes. If you've gotten in there, they've thought long and hard about you being in there. So, just accept that. Now, if you happen to be faced with something that you've never seen before, rely on your own data. There are lots of things that you have done for the very first time, and you have done them successfully. You rode a bike for the first time. You stood up and talked in front of a group of people for the first time. You wrote a paper for the first time. You have a track record of successful firsts. That is the truth. Do not be guided by the distraction that, I've never seen this before. You will learn it. You can learn it. Trust the fact that you learn things and you learn things quickly. You have 3 things in your tool chest to help you. You have your own intellect, you have your previous experience, and you have a network. Somebody in your network has seen this before. You only need to activate your power and ask for help. And often we don't want to do that because we think it's going to expose us, or we think somebody's going to turn us down. But you and I talked about this before. If you ask someone for help and they turn you down, there's one answer: next. You go on to the next person. You don't allow one person's rejection to stop you on your ascension. So if you got into the room, you should not question whether or not you can do it. The worst thing that can happen is that you fail. Okay, but guess what? Failure always brings you a gift. And that gift is called experience. Now you know how to do it better. Now you know how to do it differently. Now you know how to do it successfully the next time it comes. Because if it came the first time, it's part of your destiny. It will come again. The question is, have you learned the lesson that you can apply so that you can move through that experience the next time? So don't look at any situation and wonder, I wonder if I'm going to be able to do it. Rely on your data. You did it before, you'll be able to do it this time. And you are of a certain age where you've had disappointments before, you've had failures before, and you live to talk about it, right? So that's what you need to keep front and center, not the uncertainty of, can I? Move all of that out of the way. And here's the deal, Nely, it's a decision to move it out of the way. You can sit there and worry if you like, that too is a decision. Or you can say, I'm here. I took a lot of energy to bust through the room. Don't question whether or not you have enough energy to hang in there. Heck yeah, you do. You didn't spend it all just to get through the door. And if you did, take a pause while you sit in the room, fill up, and then get right there and make sure that folks know that you're supposed to be there and that you're engaged and that you're happy to be there.
One of the things you say in the book is that a great leader hires diversely, right? In terms of the types of people, but also skills. We know that sort of traditionally in corporate America, the diversity thing has been really bad, right? Do you feel that in this, life is about timing? Do you feel that in the last couple of years, with everything that's happened in the country and all the awakening, do you feel that it's, since you're in there in the trenches, that it's gotten better?
No question, Nely, that it's gotten better. When I first started on the street, I could name pretty much every person of color that was a managing director at all of the firms. And I could name pretty much every woman that was a managing director at all of the firms. I cannot do that today because there are far more. I mean, we all used to touch. I mean, just in my own firm alone, just in 2010, there were, I think, 14 African-American MDs, and now we're well over 60, 68, 69. I think we're above that. Unprecedented on the street. So things have changed. Now, are we where we should be? No, no way you could say that, but we are definitely not where we were, 35 years ago when I first started on the street. Here's the other thing that I'm very optimistic about. I believe millennials and Zers are going to turbo boost that which we as boomers and older Xers have been trying to do for the last 20 years. They have no patience for this trying at diversity. If you think about who led the streets, if you will, in terms of protests in the summer of 2020 on the back of the murder of George Floyd, look at who was in the streets. It was millennials and Zers. I'm not saying that boomers, traditionalists, and Xers weren't out there, but who was leading the charge, right? They have no patience for what we've been enduring, which is another reason why I think that what we've been trying to do in DE&I and now DE&I and B, that it's going to advance much faster than you saw it in the 90s and the 2000s.
Carla, what advice would you give? I think that this is a moment for African Americans to finally, kind of get their due. But I think Latino and Asians right now are still, there was a huge study that just came out, Aspen Institute did on Latinos, and Latinos had the worst 2 years in 40 years in terms of job acquisition, in terms of financially, they've gone down. What advice would you give sort of the other minorities that have still not taken advantage or that don't know how to speak up? Or what do you see as an objective person? You and I are very real with each other. What are we doing wrong that we've had the worst couple of years in a moment where we should have had the best years?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I think that we're all still living too much in a siloed way, Nely.
You and I've talked about that a lot.
Yeah, the thing is, you and I met each other now, oh gosh, it's almost a decade, I think, that we've known each other, and we started having this conversation, and we continued to have the conversation. I don't know a lot of situations where I see Black and brown women, collaborating, sharing. Here's what I'm going through. What did you go through? Okay, let's figure out where the common points are. Well, let me tell you what I did so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I just think overall, we need to do a lot more sharing with each other. And again, going back to the point that we talked about a little bit earlier, if you need some help, raise your hand, right? People sometimes get so stuck in their own stuff that they don't think to raise their heads to say, hey, could you use some help? So don't take that as an affront, or don't take that as somebody doesn't want to be bothered. They've just gotten distracted by their own stuff, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be willing to step away from their stuff in order to help you. So I think that especially as women, Latina women, Asian women, Black women, we ought to be having more collaborative conversations. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't include white women. I'm not saying that at all. But if you're more comfortable talking to somebody that you perceive has gone through the same thing that you've gone through, start there.
But you know what? You and I recently were at an event, and I think you said something so powerful. I want to remind you that, we were in a group, we were together in a group of Latinos, and you explained how African Americans, when you're on a board seat, when you have a job, when you try to fill that job or fill that position with another person of color. And because you understand that if you lose that momentum, you won't get it again for many, many years. And to be fair, I think, again, the way that, and I say this with all love, sometimes when we hear as a sister an African-American woman speak up, it scares us because it's almost like PTSD, like, oh my God, why is she doing that? Why is she rocking the boat? Because our go-to is, you know what, be quiet, just, I'm here. I'm so happy I'm just here. And I remember you and I were at that event, and one of the ladies said, God, a Latina said, I never thought that I should replace myself with another Latina. And you said to her, you might want to talk about that. Just be a little mindful when you're in a position. You said it earlier about leaders, create other leaders.
That's right.
And so maybe give us a little advice on that realm and explain, because I think African Americans have been at this longer. We forget that we've only been here, 30, 40, 20 years, 50. It's still a short time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say, Nelly, that and as I said then when we were having that conversation, I'm not so sure we had the same sensibility 30 or 40 years ago. For example, let's talk about boards when, people of color were first starting to get on boards at that point. I'm not sure everybody had the same sensibility now, but as you look around and you saw how long it took for women to really start moving the needle in terms of the number of women on corporate boards, or you see how long it took before the needle start to be moved at all with respect to people of color, then you got to think to yourself that if you don't want to go back into the position where you're starting all over again, reinventing the wheel, then as I said there, you have to be mindful of at least, spreading the wealth, or making sure that you train other people so that they can be qualified, or making sure that when someone says, I'm looking for another board director, but I don't know any women, or I don't know any people of color, that you have a list sitting in your bag. If you're looking for Latina women, I got 4 for you. You're looking for Asian women, I got 4 for you. You're looking for Black women, I got 4 for you. You're looking for, women in general, you're looking for a white woman in technology, I got 4 for you. Whatever it is, you should be thinking to yourself that you're trying to be part of the solution, and you don't want to have somebody anywhere near your earshot to say, I can't find any. You want to be that girl that has a few.
Well, and I think all of us have been in a boat. I certainly have, and I know you have, where you're the only Latina or Black woman or minority or in the room. And sometimes, I mean, I can say for myself, early in my career, there is a part of that that makes you feel special, or might make you feel like but in the end, it's you realize that is a bad move. You don't want to be the only person in the room. You don't want to be the check the box. You don't want to be the token, because then that's all you are. They're not really taking you seriously. You're kind of taking up all the room. And I think that can't be said enough.
Yeah, but I would say this. I would say don't discount yourself in that way. Don't think that you were the check the box, or you were there because they needed a woman, or they needed a Latina, or they needed a Black person. Don't do that, because no corporation chooses a senior leader or chooses a board member for those reasons. They are choosing you because they believe that you can contribute to what it is they're trying to do. But the point is, to your point about trying to make sure that you get more like you in a room, almost every woman, Black, white, blue, or green, that I know that is a corporate director, is mindful of trying to make sure that they're not the only one. Right. And in some cases, there's studies that have been out there that have said that you really see the corporation really sees the impact of the diversity when there's 2 or when there's 3. So if you think about what's happening now, many companies that have at least gotten 2 women on the board, it's not very long before there's a 3rd, right? Or if they have 1 or 2 people of color on the board, it's not very long before it's a 3rd, because they start to see the power of the diverse thinking. And the power of the connectivity to a diverse customer base, no matter who, right? So, I think, again, being mindful that you can be part of the solution, because you're probably trafficking in the talent in a way that the leadership might not be trafficking, which is why you can be value add in a particular way.
Well, first, I want to say to all of you women listening, you have to get this book for Christmas. I'm giving it as presents, because Carla goes deeply into actually teaching you in a very easy, simple way how to do this. And no one has ever taught us. But I want to pivot before we end, because so many of the women that follow me or listen to me know that I'm about entrepreneurship for women. And you speak about this idea of leadership in entrepreneurship. What happens, and I've been there, when you are in a corporation and you're learning how to be a leader in a corporation, then you go off and start your own company. And then you're like, oh no, now I have to be that person. And you're like, oh my God, what do I do? And also, one of the things that I love that you talk about too, also know to thine own self be true. Know what you talk a lot about knowing what your Achilles heel is. What are your blind spots?
Right.
And I've had to face my blind spots a lot. A lot of people ask me, why did you go back to school at 45? Because I started at the bottom, worked my way up. I found gaps in my education. I found gaps in my, leadership abilities. And I think that that's okay. I think that's the best thing I ever did, is not to just run away from it, to say, I really would like to be more masterful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And knowing where your blind spots are, I would argue, even more important if you are a leader in an entrepreneurial environment, because there's so many things that you are responsible for. And you are right, when you're going from a corporate environment to your own business, now you start to see all those things that might have been hidden to you when you were in a corporation, things that were getting done by somebody, and you didn't even realize that that was a thing, that that was a job. And one of the things that I learned when I was chair of the National Women's Business Council in the Obama administration was that there were so many women that had sort of single employee or two employee businesses and did not position themselves to scale. Even if they were doing well, they failed to make the investment around scaling before it was obvious that there was a market opportunity. And if you're going to scale, you have to have the mentality that you're going to invest to be able to handle it. Because if you, quote, blow up, your business blows up, then you're going to find yourself in a position where you're turning away business because you cannot prosecute it. You do not have enough people in order to prosecute. So you invest before the opportunity is really that obvious, is one of the things you should do. But the reason I wrote that chapter about how do you interview and pick your team is because in the 5 years that I've been working with early stage tech enabled companies, I realized that while these entrepreneurs have a great idea, it's a multi-billion-dollar idea, that does not mean that they have the skills to interview and find the right people to join them in that senior leadership team. And why should you? If you have not been interviewing people in your 20s and your 30s because of whatever job you had before, why should you know how to do that? And the temptation is to pick somebody that's like you, when that's the last thing that you need. You don't need another you. You need somebody that's going to fill in a gap. So maybe you're the kind of person that loves operations, that you can keep the trains running, that you can make this business hum, but you don't really care to be out there, selling and convincing people that they should use your company or your goods and services. Well, guess what? You need a Mr. Outside or a Miss Outside if you're going to be the Miss Inside. Or if your best and highest use is to sell the company and nobody can sell it the way you can, you need a Miss Inside, a Mr. Inside, somebody who's going to keep the company moving forward, because that's not your best and highest use. So having that self-awareness, Nely, is so important, especially if you're an entrepreneur. I would argue it's important in any kind of, especially a corporate environment, to know where your gaps are. But if this is your thing and you're trying to make it a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, you better be real clear on what you're really great at and what you're not, and then make sure that you're hiring for those things that you're not good at. Don't abdicate them. Don't walk away, because I hear lots of people say, oh, the numbers aren't my thing. If it's your business, it better become your thing, right? But you make sure that there's somebody else who's really good at it that can do that, that can help, that will give you the freedom to then go sell. But that's so critical. So as you know, in the book, I give 15 questions or so. If you do not have a kitchen cabinet or somebody to help you interview, if it's just you, here are the questions that you can ask, and here are the things that
I
you
love
look
that.
out for in their answers.
By the way, I have to say that was one of my favorite parts of the book, because it almost, again, PTSD. One of the things about entrepreneurs, sometimes entrepreneurs are really bad with employees, because you are willing to work 24 hours a day, you're killing yourself, and you're like, what's wrong with this person, right? And I remember just going through, I was running Telemundo, and then I went to run my own company, and I was like, and you really do have a little more cover in a corporation. And if you have weaknesses, you can say, I need a coach, I need this, like sometimes there are those resources. When you're on your own, then you're like, oh, I really hate interviewing people. Oh, I really don't know, and you make terrible mistakes. Sometimes you hire the person. And I thought it was so great that you almost gave us the HR list of questions.
Oh, some of my
Wow, I
HR
wish I
friends
had
have
had
said,
that.
I'm going to use your questions.
It was so good. It was so good. But before we leave, I want you to talk a little bit about, I think the greatest thing you've done is that you not only have worked in a corporation at Morgan Stanley, but you actually walked the walk and you saw that the big issue for minorities was in entrepreneurship and access to capital. And you created an incredible initiative that I've had the pleasure to go and witness. Can you talk about that? Because I know that that's a big legacy piece for you.
Absolutely. The Multicultural Innovation Lab and the Next Level Fund. And, I have to give credit to my firm, Morgan Stanley, and to my chairman, who said to me, I want you to run the multicultural client strategy. And I said, and this was in 2014. And I said, well, thank you for your confidence, but what is that? And he said, I can't tell you what it is, but I'll tell you what it's not. It's not D&I, we're doing that in HR. It's not in philanthropy because we're doing that through the Morgan Stanley Foundation. I want a commercial engagement, something that positions us as the leading firm with engaging with multicultural decision makers, full stop. And he gave me a blank sheet of paper to do that. And from that, I created 3 products. One was the Multicultural Innovation Lab. One was the award-winning Access and Opportunity podcast. And the other was the Next Level Fund and the conference, the Senior Multicultural Leaders Conference that we've done, which still is the only conference that pulls together the most senior folks of color in corporate America for a business conference, not a diversity conference, but the speakers are largely diverse, which gives you, a different tenor of a conversation, if you will, even about cybersecurity, counterterrorism, the global capital markets, whatever it is.
I loved it. I thought it was
Yeah.
so great. You learned so much.
Yeah, thank you. And let me tell you, I learn something every year, and every year we think it's so wonderful how we're going to top ourselves the next year. But I'll tell you,
you have such incredible speakers, and you just sit there and go, it's almost, one of the things that I love about it, and I love this about people don't realize in corporations, is that you guys have the resources to predict what's going to happen in the world.
yeah,
And we as normal people, I say to my team, life is about macro and micro, and you have to live between those two places. And it's very important in a macro way to spend a day going, this is what's coming. How do I plan for what's coming? How do I choose a career, or how do I choose a business that's going to be the emerging business?
Yeah, we have some of the best thinkers on the globe, no question about it. And the fact that they can, share that information so easily with the leaders that come to the conference and beyond, is just a gift. There's no other way to put it. But I'll tell you, the lab was so important because, we realized that there was a gross inequity in the marketplace. You have women getting 4% or less of traditional VC dollars, people of color getting 2% or less. And clearly the capital markets, it has an inefficiency because they're not seeing these products. So by definition, whenever there's a market inefficiency, that's where you need to play, because that means it's a huge commercial opportunity. And we thought, who better than us, because we know what it takes to get to the public market and have an outstanding, successful IPO. We know what it takes to have an outstanding private market transaction in an M&A context. So we know what the end game is. We can vertically, integrate backwards to sort of figure out what do you need to do in order to get there. And that's how we built our curriculum. And our curriculum is focused on founder development, which a lot of other accelerators are focused on, getting them ready to look at sources of capital. But if they don't develop as a founder, they're not going to be good stewards of that capital at the end of the day. So a lot of our development is on, how do you think about KPIs? How do you think about building your team? How do you think about, what's your best and highest use, in addition to sort of figuring out, how you need to pivot and how you need to think about your consumers differently, how you need to engage with your consumers. So that's what the lab is all about. And it's, 7 years old. We're the only firm on the street that has, over 60 companies that are in our portfolio where we've invested, and we own parts of the company, and we continue to invest our intellectual and experiential and relationship capital in those companies to help them grow.
Okay, last but not least, and again, this is the best Christmas present. And you know what? You wrote it in a way that's very accessible, Carla.
Thank you.
You really get it reading it. It's not like in some ether somewhere. It's down to earth. So thank you so much. But the other question that we get all the time, and that I get it too, is how do you balance your life? And what I love about you is you have a very mathematical life. You have a family.
What does that mean, Nely?
Well, you're very, you and I can go very linear and talk about, but you're a gospel singer and a very successful one, and you're an artist. So I want people to think that you see Carla Harris, or you might have a passion for art, or you might have a passion for, it is possible to have mission and money.
Absolutely.
It is possible to have a linear path where your skills are aligned with that, and yet have very different skills that are artistic and creative and beautiful.
Yes, yes.
Talk about
And
that.
yes, and I'll say that the Carla the singer is alive and well because last Saturday I released a single called Everybody is Somebody's Child, because it was my way of saying to the world, we've been focusing a lot on our differences, but at the end of the day, the one thing that we have in common is everybody is somebody's child. And the song was written by the incomparable Sean Lucas and Gail Lou DeSantis, and I loved it, and decided I was going to put it out this year. It's not necessarily a Christmas song, but I thought, why not now, when at the margin, we might have a tendency to show each other a little bit more grace during this time of year. So how about I challenge everybody with that and give them a song to
I
boot?
love that.
So I would like to say to your listeners and your followers that even though you do have maybe a linear professional path, but if there's some other things that you're passionate about, there's no reason that you cannot pursue them. We each have 24 hours in a day. The question is, what do you do with that? And many times we waste time worrying about things we cannot change. And the other time we waste time doing things over and over and over again in pursuit of perfection when it's already great. So all of that extra time where you're getting diminishing marginal returns, you can be using that time on something that really gives you joy, that makes you happy. And when Carla the singer can do something like that, Carla the banker is pretty happy, and she's really revved up to go for it after that.
And I want to end by saying, remember, women, that mentors need mentors, and that even
Absolutely.
if you are, a star yourself, even if you are super smart, we all have moments. We have to go and find our sisters. We have to find, and men, we have to find anyone that you think is smarter than you, has more faith than you, is kinder than you, is in any way. You have to reach out, because we can't do this journey of life by ourselves.
We're not
You know,
wired
we
that
have
way.
our faith and our God, and we have each other, and that's all we have.
That's exactly right. And we're not wired to do this alone. We are not wired to do this alone. So leverage the relationships that you have. And again, no shame in your game. Why not be around somebody that you think is smarter than you? They may be smarter than you in this thing, but you're better than they are in that thing. It all balances out. So no reason to feel deficient in any way. And I love being around people smarter than I am. I can't tell you how many times I go through the day and say, learn something today. I'll add that to my tool chest. Very good.
It is all about learning every day and growing
Yes.
every day. And I grow every time I spend time with you, Carla.
And vice versa.
Thank
honey.
you so much. I have such respect for you, and it is a joy, and you inspire me always. So thank
Well,
you so much.
You do the same for me, Nelly. And thank you for this opportunity. And have a great holiday.
Lead to win.
Yes, lead to win.
Bye, my sister, and thank you so much.
Bye, honey. Thank you.
Bye.